A bootleg is an unauthorized game that's usually low quality and made without the manufacturer's permission. Your first thought might be the NES, which had tons of them, but the company, Open Corporation, was unique because they made bootlegs on other consoles too. Are the games worth playing, or are they crap like all the others? Let's take a look. What's going on? It's Podrez coming at you with another video. Alright, if you want to join me, Messin, Mr. Glacia, Joey the Gamer, Big Gabby, Final Effin' Fantasy, just go to discord.podrez.net. Alright, we're gonna waste no time. We're gonna get right to Open Corporation. You might be familiar with the term unlicensed game. This is when a game is published without the permission of the console manufacturer. For example, the company Tengen published many NES games behind Nintendo's back. Nintendo didn't like it, but there was nothing they could do legally because it was perfectly legal to produce unlicensed games. Bootleg games, on the other hand, usually feature stolen properties that make them illegal, which is why we call them bootlegs and not just unlicensed games. For example, Hummer Team made their own NES port of Super Mario World. While it's an impressive translation of the original game, it was obviously not authorized by Nintendo. So what's the benefit of making bootleg games? In some cases, it's easier because you're copying assets from other games. You don't have to hire designers to make artwork, you can just get straight to the programming. For example, Juan Shinwei developed most of his games by himself, so he didn't have a lot of resources. I imagine it must have been easier for him to steal assets from other games, and that's exactly what he did. You also might get more people to buy your game because it features Mario or another well-known character, even though it's unauthorized. Some well-known games will receive bootleg ports, like Donkey Kong Country on the NES. This is a good way to entice people to buy your game because there's no NES version of that game otherwise. In 1987, a group of developers under the name Zemina began developing MSX ports of well-known arcade games. For example, Brother Adventure is a port of Mario Brothers. Street Master is an MXS port of Street Fighter. Of course, none of these games were authorized by their original companies, which is why they're considered bootlegs. But these games never appeared on the MSX legitimately, so the company might have generated a decent amount of revenue this way. In 1992, some developers from Zemina left and created their own company, Open Corporation. Whenever you hear about bootleg games, you might think of the Famicom, but both Zemina and Open Corporation prioritized other consoles over it. Open Corporation would begin developing Master System games. Their strategy was similar to other bootleg game companies. A lot of their games were inspired and sometimes completely ripped off from other games. Many of their titles have stolen assets from other games. I did want to thank Newbie Head Daisy for the video idea. Let's get on to the games. Let's try their first game ever made, Adventure Kid. It's a platformer where you have to worry about more than you do in most games. You have to constantly eat fruit or else your health will deplete. You also die in one hit unless you collect a skateboard or dinosaur. The game is a clone of Adventure Island 2, but with some differences. You always start off with a weapon, which is unusual but appreciated. There's also numerous weapons you can collect, not just the hammer. Unfortunately, this is one of the worst Adventure Island clones I've ever played. The scrolling is choppy, almost like an SG-1000 game. This makes it difficult to platform because you don't have as many frames to time jumps. There's also no menu screen where you can deposit items or your dinosaurs. The original Adventure Island 2 keeps track of how many items you had, which was a nice feature, but this version did away with that. I was excited to play this because you don't commonly see Adventure Island 2 ports, but unfortunately this was a very lousy iteration. Here's Twin Mouse. It's a poor man's Tiny Toon Adventures on the NES. Like in that game, you can switch characters at certain points, but there's only 2 characters in the game. Your only way of attacking enemies is by jumping on them. To beat the stage, you have to defeat the boss, who will then drop a key. Unlike Tiny Toon Adventures, you can't run, and the screen only moves horizontally. Some levels are completely original, while others are ripped off from Tiny Toon Adventures. The controls are terrible. You're not able to change directions mid-air, although you can make a complete stop. Your character moves very robotically without any momentum whatsoever. There's only 2 characters in the game, but only one of them has an ability. One mouse can float in the air, while the other doesn't have any abilities. Why would you even bother playing as the other mouse? While this is dumb, I partially blame Tiny Toon Adventures on the NES for this. In that game, Buster doesn't have any abilities while the other characters do. The game is way too short. The stages can be beaten very quickly, and there's only 7 of them total. You could easily beat this game in less than 20 minutes only to see a very lame ending. To give some credit, the scrolling is way more fluent than Adventure Kid. Overall, this would be more playable if it weren't for the bad controls. Here's Power Block. It's a Breakout clone but flipped over on its side. Your goal is to destroy the enemy or object in the center. Once you do, the level is completed and you fight a boss. I actually like that you're not required to clear the board. In most Breakout games, it's so difficult to get that last piece. Like in Arkanoid, there's various upgrades you can collect, like free lives and a projectile weapon. The graphics are nice and colorful, and the stages have a lot of variety. I respect that the stages all have backgrounds instead of just a solid color. There's a few minor nitpicks I have though. Some of the stages have objects that are way too close to your paddle, and they're hard to hit without losing the ball. One of the quote-unquote upgrades makes you redo the stage, which is incredibly annoying. There's also a lot of flickering when fighting the boss. All things considered, this is actually a decent game. They took the Breakout formula and made it their own. Let's try Toto World 3. It's a Mario-style platformer where you just have to walk to the right. You can take 3 hits before you die, but you're able to collect hearts which replenish your health. You have a short-range hammer which you can attack enemies with. At the end of each world, you fight a boss. The game is not overly difficult, but can be challenging at times. There's no checkpoints, so if you die, you always start at the beginning of the stage. If you get a game over, you always start at the beginning of the world. The game is definitely inspired by Mario. The controls are floaty just like Mario would be, and the graphics are colorful and cartoony. Speaking of the graphics, while they do look great, most of the sprites and tiles are stolen from other games. The music is some of the worst I've heard on the Master System. Other than that, this is very playable. Outside of the music, this does feel like a professionally made game. Even though Open Corporation mainly developed Master System games, they did make some Famicom ones. Here's Buzz and Waldog. The game was originally released in Japan as Coco Adventure. There was plans for a US version called Buzz and Waldog, but it was never released. A prototype of the game was found, however. It's a platformer that's similar to Toto World 3, but with some improvements. You can perform a regular jump as well as a spin jump. Your spin jump can break certain blocks and destroy enemies, while your regular jump clears a higher distance. Be careful though, because your regular jump cannot hit enemies. You can collect an upgrade that lets you perform a double jump, and if you collect it again, you can float in the air temporarily. Each time you get hit, you lose one of your upgrades, allowing you to take up to 3 hits. Your main goal is to collect the keys, which are hidden throughout the level. For the most part, the keys are not that hard to find. The game steals a lot of assets from other titles. The sound effects are all taken from Tiny Toon Adventures. Most of the graphics are ripped straight from Super Mario World, which is unsurprising considering a lot of the mechanics are from that game too. This level in particular is strikingly similar to a stage in Super Mario World. It's actually quite brave of Open Corporation to steal so much from that game, considering how Nintendo can be. My only complaint is the poor level design. The game constantly has you running on top of the level where you're out of bounds. I don't mind this for secret areas, but it's strange that the developers require you to do this to complete the level. There's also many points where you can't see below, and you have no choice but to take a wild guess on whether there's a platform below. When you can't double jump, it seems like every platform is just barely out of reach. On the last stage, the game makes you defeat all the bosses a second time, which is a cheap way to pad out the game. Otherwise, this is actually very playable. The controls feel just like a Mario game, and it's actually fun to play. This does feel like a professionally made game. Another surprisingly decent game is Metal Force. Unlike the previous game, you have a projectile weapon and you don't have to collect the keys. There's alternate paths, but your only goal is to find the exit. You can collect various items which can give you extra power, free lives, or continue. There's 2 weapons you can collect which have their advantages and disadvantages. The boomerang doesn't shoot as far, but it has a better vertical range. I prefer the default weapon, which shoots straight ahead. The levels are quite large and there's multiple paths you can go. There's even secret paths where you can collect items. The game is not overly difficult. You can take numerous hits before you die, and there's plenty of health upgrades throughout the game. The game resembles Mega Man, but the graphics don't appear to be ripped from any other game, at least not that I noticed. The graphics are surprisingly nice and colorful, with lots of variation between the levels. Like with the previous game, the sound effects are taken from Tiny Toon Adventures. I'm surprised they did this because the sound effects don't really match this type of game. I can't really say anything bad about the game other than minor nitpicks. Sometimes I accidentally collect a weapon I don't want, which is annoying. The weapon icons do a terrible job indicating what they're supposed to be. Some of the enemies only have a small window where you can attack them, which makes them hard to destroy. Other than that, this is a surprisingly decent game. Once again, I would consider this a professionally made game. I don't believe anything was stolen either outside of the sound effects. Honestly, if they sent this game to Nintendo back then, they might have approved it. Open Corporation's earlier titles definitely met the criteria of a typical bootleg game. They were low quality and they stole assets from other games, but some of their later titles were much improved. Games like Power Block and Metal Force could qualify as completely original titles. Just because it's a bootleg doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, hit that like button. If you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button for more content. Both of these things really help the channel grow. If you have anything to share, feel free to leave a comment. I read every single comment on this channel, and I'm pretty good at replying back. Anyway, have a good one.